Good evening. Welcome to the connected edition of the 6th Agora, the international marketplace of the 13th Animasyros Festival, the International Festival of Animation. Today, third day of our Agora, we have the pleasure to present you our session number 3 that concerns female characters, heroes, and animators. So Yannis Lolis, our moderator, will present our special guests. Yanni, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Marineta. Thanks for being here for one more day of these presentations. Animasyros 13, Animasyros 13. We have a number of presentations today. We will have Q&As for 10 minutes after every presentation. We will be right back with our first presenter. Welcome back for the first presentation of the day. We are so honored and happy to have with us Tomm Moore and Ross Stewart from Cartoon Saloon. Each one of them has a lot of individual moments of accomplishment in animation history. I'll just focus on a couple of their shared ones. They collaborated on 2 of Tomm's Academy Award nominated features, The Secret of the Kells in 2010 and the spiritual follow-up Song of the Sea in 2015. They co-directed the On Love segment for The Prophet, a feature animation produced by Salma Hayek. They're currently collaborating once again on their latest feature animation called Wolfwalkers as co-directors. Here's a look behind the scenes of this new feature.
Hello and welcome to the making of Wolfwalkers that we're presenting as part of Animasyros this year. Really wish we could be there with you. Syros is such a beautiful, beautiful location for a festival. Hopefully we can get there another time.
Yes, we're going to present a little making of Wolfwalkers, showing some of the journey and direction that we took over many, many years, making this with many hundreds of people. So I hope you enjoy it. And I hope you get to see the film soon and enjoy that too.
Thanks so much for coming to our presentation, and we'll talk to you afterwards. We're going to have a live Q&A, so we're looking forward to talking to you then. Hello and welcome to the making of Wolfwalkers that we're presenting as part of Animasyros this year. Really wish we could be there with you. Syros is such a beautiful, beautiful location for a festival. Hopefully we can get there another time.
Yes, we're going to present a little making of Wolfwalkers, showing some of the journey and direction that we took over many, many years, making this with many hundreds of people. So I hope you enjoy it. And I hope you get to see the film soon and enjoy that too.
Thanks so much for coming to our presentation, and we'll talk to you afterwards. We're going to have a live Q&A, so we're looking forward to talking to you then. Hi there, it's Tomm and Ross again, and we're joined by our lovely assistant director, Mark Mullery, and we're just going to have a chat about the making of Wolfwalkers.
Cool, yeah. Well, great to be here with both of you. I suppose what people will be interested to know about first is just how did you come up with this idea?
Okay, well, many, many moons ago, 7.5 years ago, I think, Tom and myself were doing a story workshop. And at lunch, we decided to sit down and just thrash out a few ideas about themes that we were interested in, and like conflicts that might be interesting. We were both very passionate about conservation and environmentalism and animal rights, so we thought the idea of a hunter who ends up being the hunted was an interesting conflict. Tomm had read as a teenager about this myth legend called the Wolf People of Ossory, where people at the time fell asleep and turned into wolves, but it wasn't like the typical werewolf myth or legends. It was where the wolves would be scary. It was that the wolves were kind of protecting people and protecting animals in the forest, so it was like a blessing and a curse at the same time. And I think that was the real nugget of the story there. Like I found the page from the notebook, and it was fascinating to see that the central kernel of that story was still there from that page from 7.5 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, it went through so many different directions, but still the central point is
The
still
nugget
there.
is there, and it's interesting like that. And I think it's an interesting experience I've had on the 3 films, that they've evolved a lot from the first idea, but the themes and often even the characters stay the same. I think the biggest change was during the story process and the writing process with Will Collins, that we realised that Robin was actually the wrong gender, and her whole character and personality clicked into place so much better when we realised it should be a young girl rather than a young boy who's trying to push against society to become a hunter, because actually everything would have been stacked against a young girl in that environment. So that's probably the biggest thing that changed from that original little page that we had.
Well, another thing I want to speak to you guys about was that even when I joined the project, we were still working on an opening act where Robin is actually an outlaw living with her father in the forest. What led to that change?
Well, it was an interesting challenge because we spent a long time, and some really talented storyboard artists spent a long time working on a first draft animatic storyboard reel, let's say, that explored this idea that we were following Robin and Bill in their life before they arrive in Kilkenny. And we just realised when we were watching it back and we were getting feedback from people, even though we loved those sequences, that we were spending a long time with Bill and Robin, and we were taking a long time before Robin met Maeve. And we were making a decision overall at that time as we sculpted the story that we didn't want to focus too much on Bill and the Lord Protector and that whole backstory, and we wanted to focus more on the kids. So as I remember, it was a very challenging note to take, but we dug back in and rewrote the first act to try and focus completely on Robin and let the audience discover everything about the world and the conflict between Bill and Lord Protector or whatever in the backdrop to her and her friendship with Maeve.
And so I think we'll probably end up talking quite a bit about the visual style as it's there, and there's a lot to talk about in terms of woodblock prints and things like that. Was that something that was obvious to you from the beginning? You said on your first sheet an awful lot of the kernel of the story was there. Was all of this stuff, did it come like a bolt out of the blue, or was it all a process of working through it and discovering?
I think it was there from the beginning. I remember when we were coming up with the very, very early synopsis, we had this sheet that had on one side we had order, control, cage, and then on the other side we had wildness, instinct, and freedom. And so everything, they're the two contrasting worlds, and so everything has to be rooted around those two contrasting themes. So obviously the whole city, the way that the city people are drawn, the mark making, the colouring, everything has to reinforce that idea that it's a cage for Robin and for all the people. And then inversely, the forest has to be so free and so energetic and so sketchy, and everything has to be so opposite to the town. But I mean, the really hard thing, the real difficulty of that is that they have to belong in the same world. So you can't contrast too much, or else it'll just look like two films that are jammed together. So that's when we got these amazing scene illustration artists and started exploring all the different ways that the town could be shown and all the different ways the forest could be shown, and try and merge them.
Yeah, I think I would say that we knew we wanted it to be a continuation of the things we'd learned on Secret of Kells and Song of the Sea. And Ross and I had ideas going back to Secret of Kells about that really free illustrative approach that we didn't quite incorporate into Secret of Kells, especially with the forest, which in that we kind of chose a more like stained glass illuminated manuscript look. But we knew for this we could go really wild and play with like ink splats and, you know, the edges of the screen not being fully painted out to, and really making a virtue of the fact it was hand drawn. And then I suppose the other part of it was that I had been doing interviews like this and talking about hand-drawn animation and how important it was during Song of the Sea. And I remember I was at a film festival and I was being interviewed just before Takahata was, and he was showing The Tale of Princess Kaguya. And so through a translator, I heard him saying very similar things that I was saying about how hand-drawn animation can be more expressive, how hand-drawn animation has a language that's unique to itself. And so we were both saying the same thing, so I was curious to see the movie he was talking about, imagining it was probably going to be another beautiful Ghibli cell-painted movie. And when I saw Kaguya, it really gave me a kick in the pants and showed me like, okay, hand-drawn animation can do so much more than that look of just cells on backgrounds, and we don't need to be beholden to that anymore because we're freed by technology. So I think Ross and I were both energized to try and push further than we'd ever gone before in the previous movies.
I think with a lot of with movies like this, you're always spinning a lot of plates at once, and like before you even get into production, pre-production is the same thing. While you're working on scene illustrations and building these things up, you are also constructing the story as you go. Did you feel that the style was something that was also impacting, I mean, in a good way, storytelling, framing choices, different things like that?
I don't know. I think when we were, it depends on what time of the story that we were doing it. I mean, definitely in storyboarding we were thinking about compositional choices and that. But before that, it really was just setting up two worlds. But definitely, yeah, during the storyboarding, like the scene illustrations and story and character design all had to work together. And like what I think the scene illustration artist's biggest challenge, well, one of the challenges was trying to make a world where the characters could just pop in on top of it and it would seem like it was seamless. So they couldn't go too painterly because the characters would have lines around them, you know. And then also, like if Robin is done in a town style, you know, with the woodblock print, if she suddenly is in the forest, she can't look out of place there. She can't look too out of place, you know. So yeah, I mean, it's the real challenge that like everything has to back up the story, but then when the story changes or when the character design changes, it has a knock-on effect to every single other department.
The one thing I'd say is that at the beginning of the storyboarding, Ross and I wrote a kind of manifesto of what we wanted to do, and we wanted the board artists to think about experimenting and pushing stuff as far as possible, and, you know, look at Secret of Kells and other movies that we'd worked on before and see where we could push forward. And Ross and I, like, this is something that I'd even started I think back on Kells, where we would take the script pages and do little thumbnails beside it, and that was a way for us to divide the movie up and have a first pass at sequences and get visual ideas down. So that was almost like the very, very beginning of the visual language, because you're figuring out how you're going to treat each sequence and making a little plan that, okay, this sequence is in the town, it'll mostly be dealing with split screens and flat perspective. Okay, this sequence is through the eyes of a wolf, so we're going to go really into loose camera and really, you know, push into something else. So I guess that we were all the time through, from the very beginning of boarding, thinking through the visual language.
And what about, I mean, this is our most action-packed film to date, like by a long, long way. Was that something that was, you know, exciting and kind of immediately rewarding, or was it a difficult thing to get through? Because action is very difficult to choreograph, especially if it's viewed from more than one perspective, if you're having to parallel edit.
Really good editors. We worked with 3 amazing editors, some of which we'd worked with before, like Darren Holmes and Dara Byrne and Richie Cody. And we also had a great storyboard team. And some people that were working with us had never worked in saloon before, so they brought a sensibility from other productions that was really interesting and challenging, because they'd bring a certain CG or 3D mentality that then we had to try and interpret into the style. And I think it led to some really interesting discoveries that we mightn't have come to if we just storyboarded the whole thing ourselves.
Definitely, yeah. And I think it added to the whole action, like the action sequences, you know, when Robin is breaking out of town. And I think, as you know yourself, Mark, there was some storyboards in there that we thought just looked cool, and we would figure out how to do them at a later stage, you know.
Yeah, do you want to talk about it? You had an unenviable task as the assistant director, and you know, we knew your strengths were in a lot of this sort of technical side of production, and you really helped Ross and I sort of communicate our ideas across to all the departments. Can you talk a little bit about your role? Because I think that would be interesting for people too.
I feel like when you get into actual production, the spoke around which everything revolves kind of is your layout pass. So your storyboard tells you all the intention you want in the scene, but then you've got to try and make a plan from there. And I think what I had learned from my role as technical director on Puff and Rock and on The Breadwinner was that you need to think almost the entire thing through there, and that is not something that even I often want to contend with. You know, the idea that you're locking in so much at that point. And I think what I wanted to bring to the project was, in a way, I mean, it's difficult for me to say because I adored working on this film. I love this film so much, but I also had to try and exercise this kind of dispassion as the assistant director, where I know what you guys want and I'm going to try and make it happen because I know all the departments through and through. But there's part of me that just kind of says, okay, but here are the facts, here's how it gets made. And that can be a kind of tiresome role, probably for you guys hearing me as much as
fascinating.
the other way around, but yeah.
For me, it was the most collaborative and the most, like, I really had a spirit at the start of the production since we were co-directing, you know, and I wasn't at sort of at the top of a triangle. Ross and I sort of felt the best we'll get out of this project is if we're as collaborative as possible. I remember a discussion with you early on where you were saying that like every artist in every department is going to have to really think like an artist and a craftsperson, and never slip back into being a technician. So I like that, you know. I'm actually, that's nearly a hobby horse of mine. I mean, I'm very passionate about that because this was my first time as assistant director, but my background for the last few years in Cartoon Saloon has been as a technical director. And I think technical director on a CG production tends to refer to technology. To me, technical refers to technique and the techniques that are implied in art, or that are applied in artistry. And I know that creativity, it's almost not worth looking for creativity. You should just have a practice as much as possible. And hopefully things emerge from that. And in that sense, I tend not to think any differently about our animation department, our cleanup department, or our ink and paint department. And I think that's where, that was actually, I think we were referring to the ink and paint department at the time because we were talking about how could we push the offsets in that you see in woodblock prints, which are a huge influence on the town style in the movie. How could we have that actually be turned into an animation technique? And we felt it was best to let the ink and paint artists do it. And ink and paint artists are so often just sort of expected, like, you know, you paint pot through the colors and that's it. We thought, no, they all have sensibilities. They all ended up in animation because they have some kind of sensibilities. So let's just treat them all as craftspeople. So it's actually kind of it's a feeling I am quite passionate about that I tend not to think. It was cool because we were able to see that a lot of the people working in ink and paint weren't just thinking like technicians and trying to get through the scene, but they could even contribute to the animation by making the offset be more like a blur or make the offset more like a smear in traditional animation. So, and I mean, we had a great compositing department as well, which was really nice to be able to liaise with a lot of old friends that had worked on previous productions in Belgium, and they were able to come over and join us here. So I think that sort of department, at least visually, was able to wrap everything up in in a nice bow. I think there's so much we could talk about
Yeah,
every
there
aspect
is.
of production, but I feel like,
well,
you know,
there's one I would like to talk to you guys about, if possible, actually, which is we took an approach where we often in Cartoon Saloon use digital approaches to plan things, but then actually execute them in more physical means. And so that was a thing we these things are all just tools. And so we kind of would start our layouts as this sort of digital process where we could see it almost as a previs of like, okay, this is what it's going to look like. But when it came to it, Ross, you were adamant that the layouts should be produced physically. I mean, because they're going to remain on screen for so long. And there were two different approaches that were taken there. I'd really love if you could talk about that. I mean, either the forest pencil work or...
In Wolfwalkers, we wanted the line and colour of the background split up into two different departments, and that caused like a bit of a headache, as you well know, but they're two very, very separate skill sets, and I think it would be unfair to dump both of them onto the one artist. Not to say, like, I'm sure there are many artists who'd be well up for the task, but like each on their own is such a high ask. And so Eduardo Damasceno headed up the layout line department, and Stefano Scapolono headed up the color department, and they had like such a challenge in trying to maintain this authenticity to the real media of what you were saying. Even though like the layouts and everything is there provided in digital format, we wanted as much done on paper as possible. So like we have stacks and stacks of paper, as you know, like downstairs, with these beautiful like pencil and charcoal drawings, and then also in the around the color department, even though they were working in Photoshop, they'd have like again stacks of textures and little patches of leaves, or like splashes of paint for walls and stuff, so that they would scan in and work with. And I think that's what allows the backgrounds to really shine as looking like actual hand painted, or hand printed backgrounds. And I think it works really well with the characters then too, with the textures that are put on in compositing, and then the offset colors from DIP. It's a big ask, but I think everyone kind of rose to the challenge. And
so there's sticking with that paper thing. The one thing I want to get to before we wrap up is the sort of wolf vision sequences that are in there, the kind of POV sequences. I mean, maybe Tom, you can talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it was something that Ross and I talked about early on, that we knew it had to be really special, but we weren't quite sure how to pull it off, and we were quite close to heading into production, and we still had a lot of different concepts, and we hadn't settled on a final look. And we asked a friend of ours, an animator and director, Evan McNamara, to come down, and he's someone who's very good at working with natural media and digital media at the same time, and he ended up heading up a team of really talented people, where the initial vision that you would see if you were a wolf running through a forest is very three-dimensional but very monochromatic, and the scents and the smells and stuff would be rendered with really bright colours. And overall we wanted it to look pretty much like hand-drawn frame by frame animation, which is quite a big ask. Like, to animate a character is hard, to animate an entire forest is pretty crazy ask. So the technique that Evan came up with was pretty clever. He used VR at the beginning to sort of build a forest set that he could move a camera through, and then that would be done in a very rough way as a guide, and that would be printed out, and basically every frame was hand rendered. Like, each background was animated frame by frame by a really talented team, and for us that was something like completely far from what we'd ever done or even tried to do before, but we felt it blended with the style that we were known for, because the final look on screen was very handmade. It wasn't suddenly going into this like CG digital kind of world to show the wolf's point of view. We were staying in a hand-drawn world, but now we were completely immersed in it. So I'm pretty proud of that. I think the team on that worked particularly hard. It was a pretty difficult part of the production, but maybe it's one of the most impressive or most standout things that we've done in comparison to any other movie.
Yeah, I think it really kind of encapsulates that thing that we're not, just because we work in traditional media, we're not afraid of technology in that way. We do like that we're able to use this stuff to previs, but then still get the tactile sense of the physical media that's there.
I think it's a constant balance, you know, because there's a certain sense whereby we feel like it's more timeless and, you know, more expressive, and it's our signature that things are hand drawn. But on the other hand, we don't want to like be Luddites and turn our back on the advantages, especially considering we make movies on a pretty small budget, often working with teams spread out. Like we had a French co-producer, a co-producer in Luxembourg working on the project. So we try and use the technology to help us make a more hand-drawn looking movie rather than to prevent us from being as expressive as we want to be.
Wolf Vision had to be really like the roller coaster ride though. Like for, you know, we always wanted it that when audiences would be looking at our two-dimensional world, and that suddenly we see through Robin's eyes, that they would sit up in their chair and go, oh wow, what, this is mental, like what's going on? So it always had to be like to have that huge contrast. So if our world is so flat and geometric and like, you know, 2.5D cartoon saloon style, then it would kind of make sense that would have to be something really, really immersive. And yeah, how to make like a CG planned camera move then into something 2D. So yeah, Evan pulled it off.
Well, I suppose that's enough for this short making of. We could talk for hours, and I'm sure we will in the future and commiserate over pints. But I hope that the audience have enjoyed this little behind the scenes glimpse at the making of. Thanks a lot, Mark, for helping us chat through it all. And we'll be back for a live Q&A after this presentation. So talk to you all soon.
We're lucky to have Tomm Moore and Ross Stewart with us after the video. Thanks, guys, for making yourselves available. We have almost packed house here, and we have people watching us over YouTube. So I'm going to throw it over to Marinetta, who's in the crowd audience, fielding questions. Give me a second.
Oh, I wish we were there. My friend sent me photos from the beach the other day. Looks amazing.
Any questions,
Yes,
guys?
she's there.
I was just gonna. They're being all shy, I think. I have a little bit of a question here that's come off of some stuff on YouTube, but obviously you guys have favorite parts of the production because you've done so many parts of the production in different features and shorts and all that. Is it hard or difficult to keep yourselves to keep the big idea, your eye on the whole feature when you obviously are so attached creatively to different parts of the production?
Yeah, I think so. I think what would have been handy is to maybe like keep watching the animatic, you know, to root ourselves in the very like core story and core idea as many times as possible. Because you can get focused just on the minutiae, you know, like the day-to-day things without looking at the bigger picture. But I think between Tomm and myself, we had a pretty good handle on
What I liked was that there was two of us. So sometimes Ross might be very lost in the backgrounds, and then I would have a bit of overview, or I might be really lost in some animation stuff that I was taking care of, and Ross would bring an overview. So we were able to keep an eye on each other, not getting too lost in our favorite parts. And but other than that, yeah, animation is a long slog. You know, you're on it for years, so you kind of have to keep on reinvigorating yourself as a filmmaker, and reminding yourself that there's an overall objective, and not to get too caught up in worrying about details sometimes.
Yeah, sure. I think everyone who gets into animation, they don't expect quick results.
That's right.
Hi, Tomm. Nancy here.
Hi.
Hey.
Oh, hi, Nancy.
Hey.
I wish I was there. You're probably drinking all the nice wine on your own. None for me.
It's like barely 10 degrees here, and it's probably like close to 30 there.
You're not
Beautiful
in Dublin,
Syros.
so how have you been able to develop such a major animation studio where you are?
Good question, Nancy. I ask myself that question sometimes. It's amazing. Just today we did a workshop with somebody who's helping us focus on our diversity and inclusion program. And I realized that we have, between Cartoon Saloon and Lighthouse Studios, our sister studio here in Kilkenny, over 300 animation professionals in this little town in the Midlands of Ireland, which is surreal to me. And I wish I could give you a simple answer how it happened, but I guess fair amount of persistence. And like we're 20 years going now, you know, and so over the years we've been like 10 people, 20 people, 50 people, and now nearly 300 people. And I think it's just that we kept going and we kept on insisting on quality and doing projects that we felt nobody else would do. And so I think we kind of carved out a reputation for ourselves, and now amazingly and thankfully so many talented people from all over the world want to come and work with us here. So it's just been a question of keeping at it, keep showing up, you know, it's persistence.
I think the high quality of the work, it's easier to attract people, but it's actually harder to hold on to people. You know, once the project is finished and somebody has stayed like a year in Kilkenny's a small town and they might have exhausted a lot of the possibilities. So sometimes it's harder to hold on to people, like they might want to go on and keep traveling, especially if they're younger, you know, which is only natural.
In the last 3 years though, since we set up Lighthouse, our retention has gone way up, which is great. People have been able to stay in Kilkenny much more if they choose to. So that's
because there's like a community now, so I think like there's much more of a social events to keep people you know, entertained outside of work.
And more opportunities, like if they don't have a job in the saloon, they can work in Lighthouse. So that's been positive. But we've been lucky. There's also a certain amount of timing, I guess, Nancy, that the Irish animation scene has been booming the last 10 years or so. And so that's attracted a lot of people to Ireland, and we've been able to attract people to come and work with us in Kilkenny too.
There's a question from YouTube. They're asking how early did you start working on the script for this? Was it during The Breadwinner, or? Oh.
While I was working on Song of the Sea,
2013, or maybe 2012. Long time ago.
Yeah.
Long ago.
Like probably just before some of our stars were born. Like the young actresses who played the parts were probably babies when we had the idea. And then the idea just kind of gestated during Song of the Sea. And then the screenwriter of Song of the Sea, Will Collins, started working with us formally on Wolfwalkers, I think in 14 or 15. And then as the story evolved and we designed the characters and started storyboarding all during the production of Breadwinner. Obviously we helped out in Breadwinner a little bit at the start, but you know, we had a good long development process while we worked out the story and the look with a very tiny team, just me and Ross and Will Collins, the screenwriter, and a few concept artists here and there. I guess we hit full production in 17, 18?
3.5 years ago was when we started pre-production, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
so the crazy thing that always happens is you think you have it all worked out, the script is there and everything, and then you make an animatic and you put it all in storyboard and you put it up on screen, and then suddenly everybody has notes, and often they're good notes and you have to take them into consideration. But there's something between a script and an animatic that means you nearly always, in my experience, end up rewriting. And so there was another rewrite process after the first animatic. So the writing went on for a long time, and I guess we only really kind of stopped developing and changing the story about a year into production.
And I'd say like the one thing that was an eye-opener for me though is that like you can take notes and keep changing the story forever and ever. At some point you kind of need to say, okay, this is the story that we want to make.
Yeah.
Because you know you can't implement every single note. It'll keep on going on. So you have to kind of say, okay, thanks for your notes now. This is the story.
And I'm happy to say that I think even the very first concept back in 13 had the same nugget of themes and ideas that we wanted to explore that's in the final movie. It wasn't one of those movies that completely changed from a drama into a comedy, or, you know, some of those movies that become unrecognizable from what they originally were. I do think we were lucky enough to have a true line of the things we wanted to work at. We were just refining, and we were able to take the notes that helped us get closer to the story we wanted to tell, and leave aside the notes that weren't taking us towards the story we wanted to tell. I think it's a benefit of being independent.
Yeah, I think like if we got notes, the same note off a few different people, then obviously there was something broken. If everyone thought that something wasn't working, then we had to really try and fix it. But if, we might sometimes just get one like arbitrary note just off one person.
Nuts.
And if everyone else got it, then you kind of go, oh, okay, well, maybe this person just didn't quite get it from reading the script or whatever.
Yeah, but the one interesting thing is like, if we were working for a studio and we were hired as directors to make a movie for a studio, we would be obliged to take notes from the producers and the funders. But since this was our original story, and I'm a co-owner of the studio, we were able to ask for notes from people that we respected, but also say thank you very much and not take them if we didn't feel they were helping us tell the story we wanted to tell. So the writing process was as ongoing as we wanted it to be until we felt this was exactly, distilled down to exactly the story we wanted to tell. But we weren't under any obligation to take notes from a higher up Jeffrey Katzenberg type or whatever. So we were lucky in that way.
One more question.
Hello, Tom. This is Maria. Hi.
Hi.
I just wanted to ask, how do you make a story that it's so Irish, global? It's something that really, all the films are so global, what you make, but their starting point is very personal. It has to do with the country you were born, the country you live, and you create. What's the secret besides the amazing art and the amazing animation?
Well, I don't know if there's much of a secret, because I think I learned this from looking at people like, say, Miyazaki, who makes a movie like Totoro or Spirited Away or Mononoke, and it's an insight into his culture. Especially Totoro is very much based on his childhood, and it's an insight into Japanese culture in the 50s. But at the same time, he's telling a universal story of two girls and they're missing their mother, and I mean, that's universal. So I guess the trick is that the flavor and the inspiration is local, but the story is something that you hope would resonate with anybody, anywhere. And so, it's like interesting to see a local legend or a local story being told, but you don't want it to be so sort of esoteric that only people from this location will really understand it. You want it to be something that creates a curiosity in people no matter where they come from. And I think there's commonalities all around the world just in human behavior, human relations, and that's what you look for, right?
Even if you look at like the old fables and old myths from like, sometimes 1,000, 2,000 years ago, like Gilgamesh and that, it's a completely different society, completely different culture, but you can still understand his plight. You can still, because we're all human, we all suffer the same sadnesses and grief and happiness and everything. So that's the part that is the universal, the commonality,
I've been listening to an audiobook that Stephen Fry wrote about the Greek myths. You guys are in Greece, and I mean, the stories from thousands of years ago from that part of the world, I mean, they're interesting because there's aspects of them that aren't familiar to me, a Northern European islander, but at the same time, the core of them is about human frailty. All the gods and all the stories seem to deal with human frailty, then that hasn't really changed.
Well, guys, Tom, Ross, thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate it, and we're looking forward to seeing you in Syros next year.
Yeah, we'll be there.
Yeah.
Hopefully. Invite us.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for being back here with us. Our second presentation of the day is my beloved Tünde Vollenbroek. She's a producer at production house Studio Pupil and curator at Kaboom Amsterdam Animation Festival. She has worked as a correspondent for Cartoon Brew, and she's been a board member at the European Animation Awards. As she's here to talk strategy on how to support the online release of your animated short, I should mention that her own release, Scrambled, has exceeded 40 million views online. Thanks for being with us, Tünde.
All right, thank you so much. Can you all hear me okay? Or should I talk? Okay, great, perfect, thank you so much. So first, who am I in the context of this talk? So I'm an animation producer at Studio Pupil in Amsterdam, which is the production house that I co-founded 6 years ago. We create animated shorts like Burnout Diary, Reflection, House of Broken Hearts, and we're currently developing several series, graphic novels, and feature films as well. I'm also a former journalist at Cartoon Brew, where I wrote almost 100 articles within the past 5 years, amongst which building a successful animation channel on YouTube and getting millions to watch your short film on third-party YouTube channels. So in the last few years, I've released 2 independent shorts online. One is called Tabuk. It's a 3-minute short about a young woman who gets shamed for discovering BDSM in a bookstore, but ends up freeing herself from that shame. And then there's Scrambled, a 7-minute short about a girl playing a video game on the station, only to get distracted by a vintage Rubik's Cube that challenges her to solve him. Both animated shorts had just a few €100 of marketing budgets, yet they reached respectively 2 million online views and 40 million online views. And I have to say, there's no real formula for a successful online release. Every short film is really different and thus requires a different approach. But what I'm sharing with you today is more of a way of thinking that you can use to craft your own strategy for your own animated shorts. So this is how we're going to spend the next 20 minutes. We'll discuss the strategy behind the big questions to ask yourself, the angle to choose, the platforms to choose, the to-do list to make, the release, and then the bonus afterlife. So first, the big questions. To know your goals. So for both Scrambled and Tabuk, I sat down with the film's director to discuss the goals for our online release. Here you see me and Dario, the director of Tabuk, as we look towards our goals for the future. There are a lot of different goals that you can have, both professionally and personally, so you have to ask yourself what you want to achieve. Do you want to attract new clients or an agent? Do you want to start a successful long-term YouTube channel? Develop the short into a series or feature? Do you want to make money? Want to profile your company as audience-focused, or simply deliver on a promise that you made to partners or funding bodies, etc.? Do you want to experience the thrill of reaching a wide audience? Do you want to encourage an open discussion about a relevant topic, or do you want to make an artistic statement? Those are all very different goals, and it's very important to be selective. Pick just 2 or 3 of those goals, because a strategy really only works when it's super specific. So in the case of Tabuk, for us the most important goals were profiling our company as audience-focused, experiencing the thrill of reaching a wide audience, and encouraging an open discussion about a relevant topic. So great, now that your goals are clear, you should ask yourself how big is the potential for the film to reach these goals through an online release. Tabuk, for example, was very well suited for the internet for the following reasons. It's very short, even for a short. Tabuk is short with just 2 minutes. It has an approachable design and story. There's no dialogue at all. It has an edgy theme, which does well on the internet, as you all know, I guess. It has a feel-good story, and also it's a quality film. But most importantly is that it has an audience that was really hungry for content. So now that you have your goals and your film's potential really clear, the last big question that you want to ask yourself is how much do you want to and are able to spend on this release? This goes for both time and for money. Since Tabuk was our studio's first independent short, but we didn't really have much cash to spend out of pocket, we were willing to put in a lot of time to get this short out there. And just a little bit of money. So together with the director, we agreed upon €700 of our money and 14 days of our time. The next thing we did was pick an angle that would guide us every step of the way. Before the release of the book, I googled a lot of advice on the online releasing of independent short films. And there's one piece of advice that was really essential to the success. It goes like this. Look at the film and see if you can find some kind of larger story about it that would be relevant to a wide audience. Because nobody cares about you or the film itself, at least not yet, anyway. So it's up to you to figure out what about the film is something that the majority of people would care about, and then from there, take that angle. So, what do the people who will enjoy your film care about, is the question to ask yourself. And to figure that out, you can ask the following sub-questions. You can ask, who are they? What do they like to watch already? What's on their mind right now? And how does this film cater to them? So, for example, for the book, it was the viewers are young adults or into or interested in BDSM. They like to watch mainstream kink, like 50 Shades of Grey. They're feeling embarrassed about their interests, and they would like to see films that normalize their interests and get rid of their shame. So, another example for Scrambled, it was the viewers are fans of the Rubik's Cube and similar games. They like to watch gaming-related content. They're searching for connection through their love for games with other people. And they would like to see their love for the Rubik's Cube reflected in narrative films. The answers to these 4 questions will really inform everything about your online release strategy. The content of your press release, the thumbnail of your Facebook video even, the tags of your YouTube upload, etc., etc. So if you don't know the answers to these questions, these basic questions to your own film, then do your research. Just think of films that are similar to yours, or magazines, or YouTube channels for that matter. Really tap into existing audiences and groups of people. Because once you find your angle, it's time for the next step, to start searching for the right platforms to reach your audience. Now the question is, why are platforms so important? It's something that the founder of YouTube channel, the CG Bros, once said when I interviewed him for Cartoon Brew. He said, for a film to be seen, it must first be found, which sounds really simple, but for each film I release, I map out quite an extensive view of which platforms offer the film a chance to be found. Here there are 2 groups of audiences that usually needs to be addressed differently in your strategy. There's the wide audience, and there's the industry. And there are many platforms nowadays, as I'm sure you all know. And it's great, because that means there are many ways to reach your audience. For example, through thematic magazines, through third-party channels like the CG Bros on YouTube, newspapers, influencers' blogs, socials, vlogs, animation festival socials like Animasyros, animation websites like Cartoon Brew, Shirt of the Week, Vimeo Staff Pick, etc., etc. These all fall under the category of PR, which means that you can offer your film to these platforms, but the curators behind the platform decide whether they will actually showcase it or not. Then there's the category of self-publishing. That means that platforms you can showcase your film directly on without any curators in between. For example, YouTube, Reddit, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Giphy, etc., etc., but also Vimeo, LinkedIn, Facebook groups, and of course your own website. Then there's the last category, direct communication. It can be email to friends and family, your film's newsletter, but it can also be an email to your team of the film, to peers, social media DMs, and your company's newsletter. So like I said before, every short film is different. So my successes and failures won't necessarily give you the same successes or failures as a result, but I wanted to give you some examples of both to get you thinking. So let's start with some failures. What I thought would be easiest would be emailing your team, but that was a total failure in the case of Tabuk. We sent the 20 people who worked on Tabuk emails and all kinds of fun materials to share, but they didn't really share anything, and I don't really know why, and I didn't have the courage to ask them afterwards. But yeah, it didn't work for us, but maybe it works for you. So for Scrambled, we submitted the film to, this was the email that I sent them. For Scrambled, we submitted the film to Shirt of the Week, which cost a little bit of money, and it wasn't chosen, but yeah, we thought we would just try, even though we thought the film would probably not be artsy enough for them. But hey, why not try for, what was it, $29. I also made some Tabuk memes to share on Instagram, which I related to International Face Your Fears Day, but that didn't really work. We wanted to spend some advertising money on them because we thought they really had the potential to go viral. But on the day of the release itself, I was like struggling to get everything done in one day, and I couldn't figure out how the Instagram advertising system worked. So yeah, the Tabuk memes unfortunately never had the chance to go viral. But what did work out for us really well was submitting Tabuk to the Vimeo staff pick, which resulted in 200,000 views within just a few days. And it's actually really easy to submit to Vimeo staff pick. You can simply send an email to premieres@vimeo.com. But you have to send it like at least a month before you want to release it, because it takes the Vimeo curators team quite some time to discuss your film and decide. So for Scrambled, we made a deal with the YouTube channel CG Meetup, which is a very popular YouTube channel with 3D animation films. Which you can also see in the amount of views that we got. We got 21 million views. And the deal was that Scrambled would get a certain amount of million views that we would get part of the income of the YouTube revenue. Next to this, we also offered Scrambled to the official Rubik's Cube YouTube channel to upload it directly on that, and that resulted in 9 million more views. And yeah, that's kind of success we could never have achieved just by posting it on our studio's channel alone. Oh yeah, and I must mention here that we cut off a really big part of the film's introduction. Because in cinemas, at festivals, it's really nice to take your time for a film opening. But online, audiences really just want to get straight to the story as quick as possible, otherwise they will click away. So for Tabuk, we had a different YouTube strategy, what was more long-term, by researching and choosing the right YouTube tags and thumbnail. So here are examples of that. It took me a few days to research all of that, but it was really worth it, because YouTube audiences, they really want to get exactly what they expect, so you have to be very clear in what they can expect, because that's the way that the YouTube algorithm works. And this strategy eventually resulted in almost 1 million views and 7,000 subscribers to our channel, even though we rarely post anything, because animation takes so much time. But yeah, and I think actually we could have gotten even more views with Tabuk if we had done the same as with Scramble to cut like really a part of the introduction short. But we learned from that, so it's okay. And then lastly, for Tabuk, another success was that we uploaded our film directly onto Facebook, and we advertised the posts, which resulted in over 120,000 views and 3,000 comments and shares on just a $200 advertising budget. Our advertising strategy was to reach women from 20 to 44 years old who liked the Facebook pages of 50 Shades of Grey, the movie and the film, so they were really a fan of it. And then we would select countries where people were kind of still shy about the subject, but not too shy about the subject. So yeah, these strategies worked well because we knew who our potential audience was. We asked ourselves the big questions before. So I'll say it again, if you don't know what kind of platforms your potential audience spends their time on, then do your research. Simply ask yourselves, if I were a hungry audience member, where would I search to get my daily fix of content? So, you've asked yourself the big questions, you've chosen an angle, you picked the right platforms, then now it's time for the to-do list to make your strategy a reality. This part doesn't sound nor look too exciting, and honestly, it really isn't. This is my face when looking at to-do lists. But being organized is really essential to making your strategy a reality. So after I had done all of these preparations, it was finally time for the release, finally. Here again, planning is key. You might think that you can just click the upload button and then you're done, but no. For Tabuk, I made a complete schedule for the day of release. I scheduled per time to upload on all the different platforms. I would research the information. I would have the right thumbnails already ready to go, and the descriptions as well. I've updated all the partners about it. I emailed the crew members, etc., etc. There's like lots of boring but necessary stuff to do on the day itself, so to-do list is quite functional. But once you've done all these things on your to-do list, then you can sit back and relax and just enjoy the results of your effort live. Because if all goes well, you can see your efforts reflected in the amount of views. As you can see here, the book immediately kicked off on YouTube right from the start, on Vimeo right from the start, but we needed a little bit more patience on YouTube on the right, where it took a year or so to go viral. And also the comments are so much fun and so rewarding to read. Some of my favorites are here on Tabuk. One of my very favorites refers to the gift wrapping in Tabuk. It says, "You can gift wrap me any day," tagging her boyfriend in the comments, which was really cute. So, the bonus afterlife that you can enjoy outside of your control. We had so many pirated versions, also scrambled, but a lot from Tabuk. The Tabuk ones on YouTube I would flag regularly. This is my inbox with YouTube confirmations of my flagging the pirated versions. And we did this because we wanted our version to pop up first, always in the search results on YouTube. But on other platforms, we just decided to let it go because we weren't monetizing our film or anything, and also we didn't publish it on Twitter or whatever. So yeah, you have to remember our main goals was to reach audiences and to open discussions. One example on Twitter, which I found really fun, is a pirated version of the film that got 400,000 views through some random Russian woman account. What I mentioned before about making the introduction, cutting it off for quite a bit, that's what she did. She just, I think, cut off like 20 seconds or something from the beginning, and she got 400,000 views. So yeah, I think we were quite happy with that. We were like, sure, let all the people enjoy the film. Also, just this summer, just the last few months, it was 4 years after Tabuk was made, but the YouTube algorithm suddenly decided to heavily promote the film on their main page, which resulted in a spike of 700,000 views. So even 4 years after the release, your film can have a bonus afterlife that you've never expected, which is quite a lot of fun. And then lastly, I have 7 more seconds to go. The best part of the bonus afterlife is fan art. Never ever would we have thought we would receive fan art based on an independent animated short film, but it seems that anything is possible when you find the right audience to watch and to love your film. So yeah, that's it. I hope that this gave you some ideas to release your own animated short. And I want to thank Animasyros Festival so much for making all of this magic happen this week. I still cannot believe I'm here, that we are all here, and that all of this is happening. So thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tünde, for taking us through this. I'm going to open it now to our audience for some questions. Anyone?
Thank you so much for your presentation. I think I have less anxiety for strategizing now. I get locked in the studio and work forever, so I have the artistic moments that I like, but this is really great. So I wanted to understand that there's like a small time window for when you release a project. I don't understand how social media works still. So when you strategize, it's a small time window when the pike happens, the very, very high peak of the graph, and that's what you're referring to as how to organize it.
Yeah, I would say on Facebook and Twitter and everything, the film just kept popping up randomly. But yeah, on Vimeo, it's really the films that get the most seen on the main page are the new films. So really in Vimeo, just the first days decide everything. So it's also really important to upload your film like anew. So even if you've had it online for 2 years or something for festivals, you should upload it new, because otherwise people will think it's an old film, or that has been there for 2 years. But then with YouTube, it can really just go with spikes. Like if a lot of people started commenting on it and they start doing the thumbs up, then it can really double all the time. So most of the time these views go in spikes. I think both Tubuc and Scrambled have like a steady amount of 400 views per day or something new, but with a giant spike every now and then.
Oh, hey, thanks. I just wanted to know if you knew as you were doing those films that they were meant for an online release, and did it change the way you made them, or was it a choice that came later?
Interesting. No, actually not, because the book we made for cinema to play in front of Bridget Jones' baby. And Scrambled. Scrambled more, I would say, because we knew there was this online community of Rubik's Cube lovers, and we were also planning to send it to festivals and everything. But I wouldn't say it influenced the filmmaking per se. No, because there's already so much that goes into animated filmmaking. Like, I think the mind of the director would explode if there would be one more thing added to it.
Hello. Do you believe that the social community reflects the creativity in animation? I ask that because if you know, I think that you know, you can buy also like and views in a YouTube marker, not in Vimeo, but everywhere else, for example, Twitter and everything. You can buy the views, the likes, and whatever.
So what's your question about that?
The question is that is this the reality that reflects, for example, the audience? For example, the interest of the creativities of the audience, the interest of the audience about the animation.
Well, I think if you buy views, I don't really know many animated shorts that buy views. I think it's more like people who want to advertise something, they buy followers and views. So I think we got questions about this before as well, like do you think every view is actually like one person or something? But all the comments that people place, I think to us are the most important, because then there's a real person behind it, and some comments are really detailed, they share their whole life story. So I think for us that was that meant the most, more than the amount of views.
We have a couple more questions coming up.
Okay. Hi, Tünde. Thank you for the presentation. I would like just to ask if you think that it's better to do the release of a short one by one, or if you ever had in mind to release a bunch of shorts together.
Well, I guess that could work, for some studios, but our studio, like every film is so different in audience and in theme that it doesn't really make sense. But friends of ours, they're called Frame Order, and they have a super successful YouTube channel that has like a weekly new animation. And then those are really short animations, but the independent animations that took them a lot more time, they place kind of in between. So that's really smart. I think they kind of create their own audience with faster animations, and then they can publish the more like artistic animations in between. So I think there are a lot of different strategies that could work for others, but not really for us, because every project is new.
First of all, thank you for the great presentation. My question is, you mentioned that one of the 3 main goals was to ignite the conversation around this topic. Did you also try to facilitate or be part of that conversation, or you just let it out there and just let people talk underneath the comments?
To moderate the comments, actually. So yeah, we just let it go. People would have conversations with each other, and there were comments that got 10,000 likes from other people, other users, and there were some negative comments, but we were like, whatever, didn't really.
So there was no, let's say, a microsite or somewhere else that you would direct them to have this conversation. It was just underneath the comments in the social media networks?
Yeah,
Okay.
and then, I think the most fun thing was Facebook, at least for me, because you could see people sharing it on their page. And for example, Tabuk, a lot of people would use as a kind of coming out for BDSM. So that was really nice to kind of see the conversations on their own pages. And but I think with other films we might attach like a social program to it or something, to continue the conversation. But for these two films, it was enough to just publish them. But other projects like we have a project about burnout coming up, for example, then we would definitely organize that more. Yeah, thanks.
Fantastic. Is there one more question? Sure.
Thank you for the lovely presentation and your very positive and smiling attitude. It's really great. My question is, as a filmmaker, if you're actually adjusting the way that you are making films and animation films, because they are targeted for the internet, and obviously what appeals to audiences that will watch this and like it is very different to what appeals to juries and artistic directors of festivals, so it's two very different things. So do you adjust your work as a filmmaker accordingly, and what is it that is important for you if you had if you had to choose between the two?
Yeah, interesting question. I think again it differs for each film because we never really change a film that much because we want to reach an online audience. I would say like half of our films we know from the beginning this is going to work online, and then the other half we know it's going to be tricky online, and we just focus on other things like we're working on a half-hour animated film that probably works better on television or streaming or something, better than on YouTube. So for every film we start really early already in the development phase to kind of pinpoint which partners to get and which platforms to focus on. But I would definitely not make all of our films just for online purposes. I think there are a lot of different platforms that are interesting.
Well, thank you so much for all of this. Thanks for being here. And we will be right back with our next presentation. Welcome back to our third presenter today, this third day of Animasyros presentations. 3 years ago, when I came to Animasyros for the first time, I think one of the first people that Maria Nestopoulou introduced me to, right outside Bohème, was Nancy. And I'm so happy to have seen her every year since. She's a journalist writing about European animation and festivals, as well as an animation historian. She's a member of ASIFA International Board of Directors and the ambassador at large for the Emile Awards. She has served on numerous international animation festival juries, and in 2019, she was the recipient of a Lifetime Achievement Award from Animacom Animation Festival in Bilbao, Spain. And she's here with us today, so please give her a round of applause before she starts.
Well, thank you for the lovely introduction, and thank you to Animasyros and Agora for inviting me to speak about what I think is a very important topic that doesn't get enough discussion, and that is breaking the celluloid ceiling. For women in the business world, becoming part of upper management is called breaking the glass ceiling, but in the animation industry, I call it breaking the celluloid ceiling. Although women are very prominent in the independent animation world as animators, directors, and producers, the same is not true in the industrial branch of animation. This problem dates back to the beginning of the animation industry. During the 1930s and 40s, considered Disney Studios' golden age, men and women were relegated to very specific roles. If you were a man, blessed with both creativity and artistic talent, you could become an animator. But for a woman with the same skills, the only department open to you at the time was the ink and paint department. The women in the ink and paint department played an invaluable role in the creation of early animation. Every drawing produced by the male animators and intended for the films eventually found its way into the hands of these talented girls, as they were referred to. With their delicate pen and brush strokes and careful application of vibrant color, the approximately 100 women in ink and paint skillfully prepared the celluloid sheets or cells before they were photographed for production. These talented young women helped to produce such classics as Bambi, Pinocchio, and Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Often working double shifts to meet the deadlines, ladies were paid $18 a week in 1941, compared to the $300 per week for a top male animator at the same time. The early Disney employment brochure made it clear that men animated and women were either secretaries or in the ink and paint department. If you were a female and dared to inquire about applying to Disney training school, you would receive a letter such as one written to Miss Mary V. Ford of Searcy, Arkansas in 1938. Quote, "Dear Miss Ford, your letter has been forwarded to the ink and paint department. Women do not do any of the creative work in conjunction with preparing the cartoons for the screen, as that work is performed entirely by young men. For this reason, girls are not considered for the training school." The letter went on to inform Miss Ford that to apply for a position as an inker or painter, she would have to appear at the studio in Hollywood, bringing samples of her pen and ink and watercolor work. She was further advised not to come to Hollywood, as there were very few openings in comparison with the number of girls who applied. To add insult to injury, the letter on Disney stationery was signed by a woman, Mary Cleese, who had no title after her name. In 1931, Lillian Friedman Astor was hired by the Fleischer Brothers studio in New York City as an ink and paint girl. After a few months, Seamus Calhoun, who was considered a very fussy animator, liked her work so much that he made her his assistant. He also encouraged her to animate. If Max Fleischer could be called a Victorian boss, the male staff in general was just as Victorian. When Calhoun picked Lillian out of the in-betweeners pool and made her his assistant, the men rose up in rebellion. Their main complaint was not about the quality of her work, but that she would inhibit the raunchy language and the all-male department, and, oh yes, women were inferior artists. Lillian Friedman Astor went on to become the first full-fledged animator at Fleischer Brothers Studio, with a salary significantly less than that of her studio male companions. She also became the first female studio animator to receive a screen credit for Pudgy and the Little Lost Kitten, a 1938 Betty Boop film. Lillian was only credited with 6 of the 11 films that she worked on at Fleischer Brothers Studios. In 1934, Bianca Minoli became the first woman in Hollywood to break the celluloid ceiling when Disney hired her. She and Walt had attended the same high school, and she'd so impressed Walt with her artistic talents and storytelling skills that he hired her for the story department's first woman employee. Bianca provided an entirely different perspective from the rest of the gag-oriented male storytellers. She came up with a touching original story about a baby elephant that is teased because of his looks, but whose long trunk saves the day when a fire threatens the girl he loves. Her creation of Elmer Elephant has become a Silly Symphonies classic. Master Disney animators Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnson, in their book Too Funny for Words, credit her with elevating the art of animated storytelling. Quote, "We could not have made any of the feature films without learning this important lesson from Bianca taught us. Pathos gives comedy the heart and warmth that keeps a film from becoming brittle." After a 4-year gap, Sylvia Mobley Holland joined Disney Studios in 1938, becoming the second woman in the story department. As well as being an excellent artist, she was an accomplished musician, a fact which provided useful development of the studio's third feature film. Originally called the concert feature, we know the film today as Fantasia. Sylvia contributed many of the story ideas that would be utilized in this segment that was animated to Beethoven's Pastoral Symphony. She became Disney's first female story lead artist with the Waltz of the Flower fairy tale sequence in Fantasia. Unfortunately, leading an all-male story team was not an easy job. Her male staff resented taking orders from a woman. Due to the misogyny of the period, several of her male team members transferred out of working on the fairy sequence to other departments. Even with the constant rotation of artists, Sylvia led her team to make one of Fantasia's most beautiful sequences. With all of her duties, she was the closest any woman came to being a director at Disney until 2013, when Jennifer Lee directed Frozen. So like many other women doing a man's job during the war, at the end of World War II, Sylvia was laid off by the studio. Retta Scott was the first woman to receive a screen credit on a Disney studio film when Bambi was released in 1942. While a student at CalArts in Los Angeles, Retta spent much of her time at the zoo and became an expert on drawing animals. In 1938, she joined the story department working on Bambi, where she was assigned to animate scenes featuring the hunting dogs chasing Feline, Bambi's childhood friend and future mate. Scott's snarling dogs are legendary. She is quoted as saying, "I developed the hunting dogs into vicious, snarling beasts, running and scrambling, trying to climb up the cliffs and slide back." When the men in the front office saw her powerful drawings, they thought they must have been drawn by a big, strong man, and were amazed to discover that they were drawn by a very petite woman. Retta continued to work for Disney throughout World War II on the propaganda films, but after the war, she left and became a freelancer. Discrimination against women animators was not limited to Hollywood studios. In 1939, the National Film Board of Canada was founded, and in 1942, Evelyn Lambert was hired by the NFB to work with a small male team of animators headed by Norman McLaren. They made her the first professional animator in Canada, and for nearly a quarter of a century, the only female animator making films at the National Film Board of Canada. Evelyn was first put to work in the title department, but when it became clear that she wasn't particularly fond of lettering, she was assigned to animate the maps featured in the documentary series The World Action. She used the paint-on-glass method, a technique which she was to become quite skilled at. For more than 20 years, Lambert worked closely with Norman McLaren. She began as his assistant, but their collaboration soon grew into a true partnership that saw her credited as co-director on the numerous films that they directed together. Their most notable work as a team was the 1949 Begone Dull Care, painted and scratched directly onto film stock to create a visual representation to Oscar Peterson's jazz music. In 1957, Lambert and McLaren received an Academy Award nomination for A Cherry Tale. In the 10-minute film, a chair animated by Evelyn refuses to be sat upon, forcing a young man to perform a sort of dance around the chair. By the late 1960s, Evelyn focused entirely on her own work, producing lovely films for children. She undertook every creative part of the film process herself, from writing the story to character design, painting, and drawing. Unfortunately, we all know the work of Norman McLaren, but as co-creator on numerous films, Evelyn Lambert is all but forgotten today, even though she was the First Lady of Canadian Animation, received an Academy Award nomination, and her work paved the way for Canadian women in an industry that is still a primarily male field. After all that we've learned about women in the early years of the animation industry, you would think that things could only get better. But are they really better? I wish I could tell you that the situation is much better for women in the industry today, but it isn't. According to a survey conducted in 2018 by the group Women in Animation, 60% of today's animation students are women. But as they move into the industry, only 20 to 40% of the professional roles are held by women. I was amazed to learn that since the inception of the short animation as a category at the Academy Awards in 1932, only 4 women have won an Oscar on their own as a director. The first one was Joan Gratz for Mona Lisa Descending a Staircase in 1993. It took 62 years for a woman to be recognized in her own right as an animation director. We had to wait until 2007 to see a woman recognized again when Torva Kove was honored for the Danish poet. The following year, Susie Templeton received the award for Peter and the Wolf, and then finally, in 2019, Dominique Shu was honored for her film Boa. It was big news in the industry in 1998 when Brenda Chapman became the first woman to direct a big-budget animated feature film at a major studio when she headed the Prince of Egypt teamwork at DreamWorks. But even directing a hit feature doesn't protect you, as Chapman found out in 2011 when she became the original director of Brave, only to be replaced as director halfway through the film. Referring to her dismissal from Brave, Pixar said, Brenda said, "This was a story inspired by my relationship with my daughter, and I created it. It came from a very personal place as a woman and a mother. To have it taken away and given to someone else, a man at that, was truly distressing on so many levels." The official line is that Brenda was removed for creative differences, which is a catch-all phrase for a director and a studio having very different visions for a film. In what is a bizarre twist of fate, when Brave arrived in theaters, 2 directors shared full credit for the film, Brenda and Mark Andrews. When the film went on to win the Academy Award, Brenda made history by becoming the first woman to win an Academy Award for a Best Animated Feature, a prize she shared with Andrews. Commenting on the position of women working in the industry, Chapman feels that, quote, sometimes women express an idea and they are shot down, only to have a man express essentially the same idea and have it broadly embraced. Until there are a sufficient number of women executives in high places, this is going to continue to happen. Pixar didn't promote another woman to be a director until 2018, when they announced that Dominique Shu would be the first female director of a Pixar short animation. And Boa went on to win the 2019 Oscar. A perfect example of Hollywood's idea of addressing diversity came in December 2016, when The Hollywood Reporter, a major weekly film and animation industry trade magazine, published their first Animators Roundtable. The topic for that year was avoiding stereotypes and how to break the mold of princesses. The 7 panelists were all men: directors Brian Howard, who made Zoetrope; Garth Jennings, director of Sing; Travis Knight from Kubo and the Two Strings; Trolls director Mike Mitchell; director John Mersker from Moana; Seth Rogen of Sausage Party fame; and Mark Osborne, who directed The Little Prince. Undeniably, they're all talented creators, but it does seem something is wrong, given that the topic of the conversation is avoiding ethnic stereotypes and breaking the princess mold. Every participant on the panel is a white man. When asked to comment on the roundtable, Brenda Chapman said, "The title of the piece and the photo of the participants made me laugh. At the absurdity of it all, I thought this is a joke. A roundtable about ethnic and female stereotypes, and they choose 7 white guys as their experts?" Apparently, the roundtable didn't solve much. I recently read in the British newspaper, The Guardian, about a new Hollywood feature film called Charming. In their review, the writers called it a badly botched attempt at fixing fairy tale sexism. He said that the Prince Charming is irredeemably a dull character, and that the 3 fair maidens to whom he's engaged, Snow White, Sleeping Beauty, and Cinderella, are brainless bridezillas who switch about like beauty pageant contestants, hands on jolting hips. Surely they're supposed to be under a good spell, but they act like they've been lobotomized. The reviewer went on to quote one princess as saying, "My prince found me passed out on the floor. He did what anyone else would do. He kissed me. In 5 seconds we were engaged." The reviewer went on to say that one of Cinderella's finer lines is, "Ooh, I like shoes." What's it going to take to change Hollywood stereotypes? I agree with Brenda Chapman that there's a need to be more women in the upper management levels. It is encouraging to see more women producers, but of the 120 top animated films from 2007 to 2018, just 4 of them were directed by women. It is important to talk about this problem of women in animation industry, but just talking isn't going to solve our problem. When we see a woman in the industry being treated unfairly or put in a demeaning position, we all have to speak up. Perhaps it's time to revert to the age-old tactic of striking, when all women in the industry go out on strike to protest a woman's treatment in the industry. But then again, what does a young woman in the gaming industry or in the animation industry have when she is assigned to work on a game or a film that she feels is sexist? Can she afford to lose her job? Or even worse, get the reputation of being uncooperative in a male-dominated industry. The same goes for women working in animation studios. I wish I had a solution to the problem, but no matter what the answer is, we must keep trying to make inclusion at all levels in the industry open to everyone. Get rid of an old boy network which makes inclusion of women easy, and work to get rid of the gender stereotypes that are so often fostered in Hollywood animation. I don't want to rid the industry of men. I just want to see that women have a level playing field when it comes to jobs in the industry. Thank you all for coming to hear me this evening. Bring them at me.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Nancy. We will open the floor for questions. I'll ask one. Do you feel there's a difference between the two sides of the pond, between Europe and the US when it comes to this issue?
Yes and no. When you look at the number of women who create independent animated films, and especially features, there's a much larger number here in Europe. But when you look at the major studios, you still see most of those films are coming from men. But there are many more opportunities for women in Europe than there are in Hollywood.
Great.
Oh, somebody must have a question after all I said.
Twofold question. First is, do you see a trend in festivals, like you see in Cannes, for example, and other festivals where they said that they're going to have a 50% directors from that are male or female. Do you see this trend to start happening in animation festivals as well, because you travel in a lot of festivals? So that's my first question. And then the second one, to see more women in animation, obviously you need to have an equal number, I guess, studying animation and then gradually, evolving in the industry. So in the grassroots level, do we see the numbers being equal, or do we have to do more to encourage more women to get into the industry? Obviously, we need to do more in helping them develop in the industry.
I think the first part of the question was, there's a trend in other types of live action film festivals to sort of tipping the scales to even the scales between accepting entries from male and female directors, and if you've seen that happening in animation festivals. And the second is, do you think there's enough things happening on the ground to help women and girls, I guess, get into animation early on that would eventually tip the scales differently?
As far as animation festivals, there are so many independent animation women working successfully, but you don't see their films in theaters. And a lot of them make films using their own money as opposed to being able to have access to studios. One of the good things that happens in Europe that does not happen in the United States is that there are good co-production and grant possibilities here that make it possible for women to make films. The bad thing that happens is that, as I said in my speech, women very often make 1 or 2 short films, independent, and then they get married. And who's making more money in their household? Their partner. And they have a child. And when you also have to have a job because you've bought a house, then you have to be animating more in your spare time. There's some wonderful programs that help women all through Europe. But in America, any funding for animation is almost impossible. There's no funding system like we have here. We're so lucky. But it still doesn't solve the problem of what happens when a household needs two incomes. And what was the second question?
If there's enough happening for young girls to get into animation.
I think a lot of women get into animation very early, but just as I said, there's the financial problems. And that's why I think it is so important that we encourage young women to follow in the footsteps of people like Joanna Quinn, so many of our really great female animators here in Europe. But it still isn't an equal playing field here. Hopefully, someday it will become.
There's another question from the audience.
That was a great presentation. Thank you. I was in Cal Arts and it was an open-minded school. But what I noticed between the animation school and the fine arts school, I was in the fine arts school, but I was in the animation classes, that there was no discourse, no conversation on the animation school whatsoever about what you said or women's rights in the industry. So they just did, it's heavy on they do a lot of production because of the class is highly technical. And I think, I'm asking you too, but I think the education is the problem, that if we start from there, then a lot of things can be sorted out. Because in the art school, there was a discourse, there was more open-minded and there was a conversation in the fine art school. But in other schools, they get to be more technical and they don't approach these subjects from the beginning.
There's not enough discourse there's a lot more discourse in fine arts schools rather than what are technical schools that maybe represent animation.
Yeah, that's very true. And also, a woman who decides to become a painter or a sculptor, these are things that you can often do without the economic burden of making a film. And I think there isn't enough technical, and women who are interested in the technical win are often discouraged.
Well, I'd love to thank you for being here. We are trying to keep on schedule. I think we could go on talking about this for a very long time. Thank you so much,
Can I say
Nancy.
one thing?
Yes, absolutely.
I'm here for the rest of the festival, and anybody who would like to talk further about this, I'm out and about. Don't hesitate to come and approach me, please.
We'll be back in a few minutes. Well, thank you for being back here with us for the last presentation of the day. We're very excited for this presentation. We're going to have with us Signe Baumane. She's a Latvian-born independent filmmaker, artist, and animator. Many of her films are told with a strong female point of view. She's not afraid to experiment, be provocative, or bring the most personal of issues to light. 16 animated shorts and 1 feature film rocks in my pockets, with an astonishing presence at over 560 festivals, including Sundance, Berlinale, Annecy, and of course, thankfully, Animasyros. From her studio in Brooklyn, New York, she will share with us pieces of her second animated feature, currently in production, My Love Affair with Marriage. She is joining us along with her producer, Sturgis Warner.
Hello.
Hello. Hi, Signe.
I'm very happy to be with your audience, and I wish I could be there in person, but maybe one day.
Maybe one day soon.
One day soon, before long. I want to tell a little bit about My Love Affair with Marriage. Actually, I would like, before we do anything, we probably should see the clip. The film is about a young woman, Selma, who is, as a growing up girl, 6 years old. She's wild and untamed and very spirited and strong. And then as she gets older, she realizes that most of anything she wants in life is love. And in order to achieve love, to be loved and to achieve love, she needs to change herself. Because in a society where she grows up, gender, love, and sex are entwined in one package. So she works on it to change herself into this feminine person, and then it brings unexpected results for her 2 marriages that she goes through later in her life. And so this particular clip is in the moment when she goes to college, and she has a best friend, Daria, who has made different decisions in her life. Daria has decided that she's equal with men, that she could equally party and drink and do drugs and do all these things that men do. She could do equally with them. And just before the clip opens, Zelma has received a proposal from her lover, Sergei. And so then that's when the clip starts. That 5-minute clip that we're about to show you, that's when the clip starts.
Fantastic. So Signe, we're gonna play the clip for the crowd here, and we'll be right back with you guys, okay?
There was a dark secret side to the incomprehensible adult world that neither books nor drugs told us about. What kind of world was it where you made just one mistake and you were dead? Somewhere between the parties and getting drunk, high, or stoned, Daria had gotten pregnant. She couldn't believe that her body would do such a thing, so she carried on as if nothing had changed, until her feet and hands started to swell. She was too afraid to go to a doctor. Besides, her mother had cursed her for losing her virginity and banned her from coming home. Then Daria's whole body started to swell. When she had a seizure, we finally called an ambulance. We were told that the baby had been saved at the expense of his mother. Now Daria's body was permafrost cold, her skin a bluish color, coated with tiny ice crystals.
Forgive me, please. Forgive me, please. Forgive me.
Men don't die like this. Men die heroically in wars. A woman's death is just so banal. Who dies in childbirth, for fuck's sake?
In the name of the state, I welcome you here to honor the life and mark the untimely death of the friend you loved. Darya Mishkina was an outstanding citizen of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. She was also a trusted friend and a caring daughter. Would you like to say anything?
Daria was a good woman. She could take a lot of drink.
Please say goodbye to your friend and daughter, Darya Mishkina. Please close the lid. I declare, by law of the state, that Darya Mishkina now ceases to be a citizen of the Soviet Union. She is officially dead. Let's honor Darya Mishkina.
The world is an incomprehensible, complicated place. There are just too many shades in it. I get lost in all the variations and possibilities. But the world, it turns out, is very simple.
Just like a pimple, the world is very simple.
It has only two parts, male and female. Male is everything rational, female is everything emotional.
Men are sane, women are vain.
You can see it in nature. Air and earth have different qualities too.
Laws of nature by the pair, yin and yang, earth and air.
Love exists to keep the world in balance and unity. Women fall in love with men because men are smart. Men fall in love with women because men need support.
Don't ruin the beauty of the natural plan. Your woman's duty is to be with a man. Better be a rose than a wildflower. Submission is your ultimate power.
No, thank you.
We're back with you. Can you hear us?
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
You want to keep talking to us a little bit about the film?
Yes. As you can see, the film is kind of a mix of comedy and drama and darkness and humor, and also music. It's part musical. And the songs, we have about 23 songs, and they were written by a very talented Italian composer, Cristian Sensini. And I think he's sensational. and recorded by Trio Limonade in Latvia. Which brings us to the co-production aspect of this production, which is, Sturgis, would you want to talk about it?
Yeah, just very briefly, this is a co-production between Latvia and Luxembourg and the USA. On the USA front, we've been raising money for this film. Actually, all 3 countries have, and so it's been funded entirely by individual donations and by grants. So there's been no connection with any studios here in the U.S. So that's been our challenge.
So we started the project. I wrote a script in 2015, and then 2016 came, and we were thinking that there will be in this country, in the United States, there would be a woman elected president, and we kind of, I wouldn't say feared, but we were thinking, oh, she's the subject of a woman's life, and the society pressures are not on a woman and her love relationships. It's not going to be relevant in Hillary Clinton presidency. And we were wrong, and unfortunately. And so the subject of women's life and the pressures women face from society is actually increasingly getting more and more important. And the other aspect of this film that you didn't get to see is a scientific part of. We actually cover in the story seamlessly, with the help of animation, we cover the biology of how people fall in and out of love, and why we stay in abusive relationships longer than we should. What are the biochemical and neuron processes in this falling in love and out of love and marriage thing, and how society hijacks the concept of love for marriage. So it's just, I think it's a very interesting exploration of the subject, and yeah.
To find out more about the project or to hook up with us, you can go to our website, which is myloveaffairwithmarriage.com. We would love for you to join our mailing list. We send out updates to all our backers and all the people who care about this film. This film has been going on for 6 years. It's going to be ready in 2021. We'll see what kind of venues are available at that time. We're sort of grateful that the film is not finished right now, because we still have, another 6 months or so of work to do on it, and we'll see what the circumstances are then.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to artistically, we went, I don't know if you have seen my previous film, Rocks in My Pockets, where there is 3-dimensional backgrounds and incorporated with handmade drawings. And so we are pushing farther to the limit what we could do. I mean, there's no limit yet. I think there is another 5 films to create in this technique, but it's a similar technique. It's just more advanced. The sets are more elaborate. Sturgis, actually, he's not only co-producer of the project, he's also a carpenter and lighting designer. And you can see there's a new set behind here that we are about to shoot after this conversation. So that is mixed media and mixed genre, project incorporates a lot of art forms.
Yeah.
Well, we're so very excited to see the finished product. We feel so honored that you could actually be online with us today here at Animasyros, and we hope to see you here soon. So first of all, thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you.
I'm gonna open it up for a small Q&A, so hold on one second.
Hello, I think I know. Hello. Hey.
There she is.
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, nice to see
Hi,
you.
Sturgis.
Hi.
It's so good to see you, even if it has to be in this distance and on a computer.
Yeah.
You're looking great.
Yeah.
I'm here with the festival director.
Hello, I'm Marianne Estapoulou.
Hi,
I'm a great fan of you.
Thank you.
I've been admiring your work for so long. The tribute that we have made to you years ago is one of my favorite ones I have put through. So I'm really glad that I'm here.
Thank you.
So I'm actually here for a kind of a special purpose. You know, every year a SIFA honors a person who they feel embodies the true independent spirit and who has turned out an admirable body of work that inspire all of us in the animation community. And guess who this year's award winner is? It's Signe Baumane.
Oh my God, no.
Yes, and not only that, but your beautiful award has been created by Joanna Quinn.
Oh my God. Who could do like these incredible things, and I said, there is only one person in the world who can do this, and there's only one Joanna Quinn, and she's just like one of the kind, and nobody can do what she's doing, and I just love her and her work. I'm just beyond belief.
Would you remember when I asked you who your favorite female animator was in the world? That was, yes. And you can't see it very clearly, but she has drawn Burl running with a crown to crown you Queen of Animation.
Oh my God, the bear is not Beryl or Bear?
Toilet paper,
no,
dear.
No, Beryl.
So,
that is
on behalf of
amazing.
SIFA, I
Oh
must
my
congratulate
God.
you,
Oh.
and I'm so proud of you.
Thank you. I just like, I'm like overwhelmed. I have to go rest now. I have to drink my nerve tea. Oh my God, thank you.
Well, it just gives me a great honor and pleasure to do this for you.
Signe, here's one last round of applause from all of us.
It's incredible. I'm speechless. I'm honestly.
That doesn't happen very often.
I am rarely speechless, but I'm really, you got me.
I'm going to sign off the session, and I'm going to leave you on with Nancy for a little bit. Everyone, thanks for being here for our third day of presentations. We'll be back here with you tomorrow at 11 a.m. Thank you so much.